Hold on to your butts, everybody, because Russia has invaded Ukraine and they are not going to stop there. I'm going to show you exactly where in Bible prophecy we find out what Russia is going to do in the not too distant future. In the book of the prophet Daniel, in chapter 7, Daniel relates to us a dream vision that he had during the reign of King Belshazzar while Daniel was a prisoner in Babylon. Now, earlier in his life, Daniel had interpreted a dream for a previous king. His name was Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel actually consulted God because Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't tell anyone what his dream was. And Daniel was able to get from God not only the dream itself, but the interpretation of the dream. And he went and told Nebuchadnezzar this. It was about a statue that was made out of various metals, and each of those metals was a different superpower of the ancient world, starting from Neo-Babylon during Daniel's lifetime, and proceeding forward all the way to Rome, and then to the final Rome, the final reincarnation of Rome, if you will, at the end of the age. Theologians have traditionally connected Daniel 2's statue dream with Daniel 7's vision of the four beasts. I'm here to tell you there really is no connection, and the vision of the four beasts is about the superpowers that exist and struggle with one another toward the end of this age. Now, both dreams were about mighty kingdoms. I like to call them superpowers. You can call them empires, world-changing empires, or whatever you want to, but that's where the similarities cease. We're going to read through Daniel 7, and I'm going to point out where it tells us in the text itself that this is not about the ancient world, that this is about modern times, our times, at the end of the age, going into the millennium of the Messiah. Daniel chapter 7, starting verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head on his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the sky broke out on the great sea. 4 great animals came up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet as a man. A man's heart was given to it. This is about Great Britain. Great Britain has always had the lion as its symbol, and it has been one of the greatest empires of all of history. In fact, it was the empire on which the sun never set because it covered the entire world for many decades, centuries even. And so it would be very logical to think that this lion is Great Britain. And what makes it even more clear to us is that this lion has eagle's wings on its back. So what's the other superpower that came out of the lion? It's America. People wonder, where is America in Bible prophecy? It's right here. It's the eagle's wings that came out of the back of Great Britain. Those wings, unfortunately, are plucked off. That means we have to expect that America is going to be taken out of the picture. And then this lion is lifted up from the earth. What does that mean? In the Bible, when you're a beast, you're set against God. Okay, you are wild in terms of your spirituality and your connection to God. You are not the way that you should be, which is like Adam, the man that God created, that was made in God's image, that was made to be like God, to be a reflection or a shadow of God and his all of his aspects that only human beings carry and animals do not. So if you're an animal in a prophetic sense, in a biblical sense, you are not what you were created to be. You have become earthly, you've become wild. Right now, Great Britain is not an image bearer of God, but we should expect that that's going to change. There's going to be some kind of amazing revival, and Great Britain is going to become godly. They're going to become an image bearer. Why? Because they are made to stand. Okay, it's not they themselves that do it. God makes it happen. God brings the revival and makes them stand up on 2 feet. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I hope I get to see that. I'm definitely pumped that revival is going to come to Great Britain. Unfortunately, America is not going to do so well. But that's it. That's all the information we have. the wings are plucked off. We have to go to other sources to get more detail about that. And again, that'll be in another video. Continuing on at verse 5. Behold, there was another animal, a second, like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. They said this to it, Arise, devour much flesh. Let me check another translation here, like the ESV. I was reading from the WEB. This is the ESV. It says, it was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, Arise, devour much flesh. So something tells this bear, it's an angelic voice or a spirit of some kind from heaven acting on God's orders that is then commanding something on the earth to happen. Okay, so it's a heavenly voice that's saying this. That's why we're not told who the it is or what the it is. So what is this bear? Now, again, theologians have always made this about the ancient past. And so they said the lion, that's Babylon, that's Neo-Babylon. Certainly Neo-Babylon had lions in a lot of its symbols and on the walls. That motif showed up in the artwork of Neo-Babylon. But there were dragons on walls in Babylon, and oxes or aurochs were also found on their artwork all over the place. So why the lion? I guess if you have to pick something, that might be an okay symbol for Neo-Babylon. We can't argue with that too strenuously. But the bear, as being a symbol of the next great kingdom that arose, is a connection that it just is not substantiated in history. But that's what you have to do if you're going to interpret this as being about ancient kingdoms, because you're starting from Neo-Babylon, and then what happened? The Medes and the Persians arose and took over Neo-Babylon. So they were the next great power. That means they would have to be the bear. But again, the bear was never used to express Medo-Persia. Now, as I was praying through this passage of scripture during my own studies of Daniel years ago, I asked God, why is the bear raised up on one side? He gave me an answer, and he gave me an answer right away, which is not common at all. But in this case, he graced me with something as I was praying. And he said, go look at a population map of Russia. So I did. And immediately I understood, because take a look at this. Most of the population is on the western part, the western half. In fact, it's not even half of the country. It's maybe like a third of the country is populated pretty densely, and the rest of it is nearly empty. I mean, there's one high density area to the far east and one to the south, but everything else is to the west. And so that's why it's raised up, because all the power with the people is on one side. That answered that question for me, and it solidified the fact that the bear is Russia. The bear is definitely not Medo-Persia. Now we're going to come back to the part about the 3 ribs and the devouring much flesh. Let's go on and read the rest of this, okay? After this I looked, this is verse 6, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night vision, and beheld a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things, or proud, boastful things. Is another way that you can interpret that. Now, this 3rd beast kingdom is like a leopard, but it's a leopard with 4 heads. It's going to be a coalition of nation states that have leopards as big symbols, but they're going to also join forces with either 2 or 4 nations that have birds as their symbols. Now, dominion is given to this beast kingdom, which I think means that it's not going to conquer and take over territory and gain power for itself, that some other kingdoms that already have power are actually going to give authority and hand over power in this region to this coalition. I suspect that this is going to be Central, South, and East Asia, because that's where the leopards are. You have some leopards in Africa, but there aren't any superpowers down there. There are major world powers in Asia and Central Asia and Eastern Asia. And so that's more than likely where this superpower or third beast kingdom is going to come from. So let's keep our eyes on what's going on over there. Now, the fourth kingdom is the worst one. It's different than the rest. It's not even really described as being like any particular animal. It's just terrible. It's a terrible beast. It's the strongest, and it's the one that's going to do the most damage. This is what would correlate with its 10 horns. It would correlate to the final stage of the Roman Empire with its 10 toes. If we look back at the statue vision of Daniel 2, how that all turns out is that at the very end of the age, this revived kingdom that it was iron before becomes mixed iron and clay, and it has 10 toes. And those 10 toes are 10 kings, which we know from the book of Revelation. So I know that was a lot of information right there, but let me just tie it all together for you and say that what we could call the New World Order, which you've probably heard a lot about, that world kingdom, that great empire that's going to take over so much of the world at the end of the age, is going to be led by 10 kings. That's what the horns are. Horns are kings. They are people of great power over nations. There's going to be 10 kings, but then Daniel says there's a little horn, a little ruler that comes up from somewhere, displaces 3 of those kings, and then becomes very great. In fact, Revelation says eventually the rest of the kings, the other 7, are going to give all their power to this little horn. This is the Antichrist. He speaks proud, boastful words, probably just in general, but also against the Most High we see later in Daniel. Let's continue in Daniel chapter 7, verse 9 to see what happens with these beast kingdoms. I watched until thrones were placed, and one who was Ancient of Days sat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came out from before him. Thousands of thousands ministered to him. That would be spirits. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. We're told that the angels are without number. They're like, in fact, in Revelation, it uses that description again. 10,000 times 10,000 angels and spirits were before the throne. The judgment was set. The books were opened. I watched at that time because of the voice of the great words which the horn spoke. I watched even until the animal was slain, or the beast was slain, and its body destroyed, and it was given to be burned with fire. As for the rest, I'm going to stop there. When God judges finally everything that's going on with these earthly kingdoms and with the ways of man, he is going to destroy the Antichrist and throw him into this lake of fire, which is going to be called Gehenna. It's in a location outside of Jerusalem. But after he is destroyed, this is what's important, okay? This is the critical part. Listen to this, verse 12. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. The terrible fourth beast kingdom gets destroyed, and the one who was leading it, this little horn that became a great horn, he is destroyed with fire. But the other beasts are not. They're allowed to continue on. Now their power is taken away, their dominion is taken, so they're no longer really operating as sovereign nations. But they are allowed to continue in some sense past this time of judgment for a while. That's very interesting. Let's see what else happens here. Verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, there came with the clouds of the sky one like a son of man. And he came even to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Dominion was given to him, and glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom that which will not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was grieved within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near to one of those, he's talking about angels, who stood by, and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me, and made known the interpretation of the things. These great animals, which are four kings who will arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High, verse 18, will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I desired to know the truth concerning the fourth animal, which was different than all of them, exceedingly terrible, whose teeth were of iron and its nails of brass, which devoured broken pieces and stamped the residue with its feet. And concerning the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 fell, even that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great or boastful things, whose look was more stout than its fellows. I saw, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Pause. What's being shown here is the rise of the Antichrist. We know from other prophecies that he is going to declare himself to be God. He's going to try and change all the rules, and he is going to engage in great persecution against all of the people that will not bow the knee to him and do what he wants. And that time period is called the Great Tribulation. Yeshua talked about it during the Olivet Discourse. He said that when you see the temple desecrated and the Antichrist sets up this abomination of desolation in the temple, then at that point, there's going to be great tribulation for the next about 3.5 years. Okay. This is what Daniel is seeing, but he also sees that the Ancient of Days does not let that continue and delivers the world over to Messiah and the saints, which are co-rulers. We see in the end of Revelation, the saints are going to sit on thrones and rule with Messiah over the world. The one who leads the saints is this Messiah figure that we saw in verses 13 and 14, the end of Daniel's dream. He is the one who comes before the Ancient of Days, who came with the clouds. Okay. This is the Messiah who was resurrected and went up into the clouds after he rose from the dead. And he will come back in the clouds, as the angels told the disciples, and as the Apostle Paul described in his epistles, and as the book of Revelation describes. Yeshua, the Messiah, went up into the clouds. He waits now in heaven for the Father to give the word, and he will then come back in the clouds at the end of the age. But the Ancient of Days has given him everything. And Yeshua himself said, all authority and power is given to me. So he is the King of Kings, and he's only waiting for the signal from God Most High to come back and take what is rightfully his. He has to let evil increase to its climax first before he can do that. But that day is coming when the King of Kings will rule over the whole world. Now let's continue from verse 23. Thus he said, the fourth animal will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different than all the kingdoms, and which will devour the whole earth and will tread it down and break it in pieces. Now, even though it devours the whole earth, it takes over basically everything. It's not going to do away entirely with these other beast kingdoms, because we already read they're going to be able to continue on into what we call the millennium, or the reign of Messiah. So we can't take this ultra literally and think that, okay, the fourth beast kingdom is going to be all there is. No, the other three still exist, but when it says that it will trample down the whole world, it is going to, in large part, extend its tentacles out throughout the entire earth. But it will never completely assimilate or destroy every other kingdom. Verse 24, as for the 10 horns, 10 kings will arise out of this kingdom. Another will arise after them. Now, note there that it called it a kingdom, even though previously it said that the beasts were 4 kings, but now it's calling them a kingdom. So we need to read king and kingdom as synonymous in these prophecies. Okay, we see the same thing later in Revelation. It's just the way the Bible prophecy does it. Kings, kingdoms, it's the same thing. Okay, another will arise after them, and he will be different than the former, and he will put down 3 kings. We talked about that already. Verse 25, he will speak words against the Most High and will wear out the saints of the Most High. He will plan to change the times in the law, and they will be given into his hand until a time and times and half a time. That's a description of what I was talking about earlier with the Great Tribulation period being about 3.5 years, and the Antichrist trying to force everybody to change the religion that God has established. Verse 26, but the judgment will be set, and they will take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it to the end. So the Antichrist is not going to succeed for very long. Verse 27, the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole sky will be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions will serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts much troubled me, and my face was changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. And that is the end of that oracle. The pivotal verse here is verse 12, because it lets us know that the other beast kingdoms are going to exist at the same time as this fourth beast kingdom. So if the Son of Man is replacing this fourth beast kingdom and its king, the Antichrist, that has to happen at the end of the age, because Yeshua is not coming back until the end of the age. So we're talking about the transition point into the millennium, or the 1,000-year reign of Christ. We're not talking about ancient history. And the other three beasts are contemporary with the fourth beast kingdom. These are not kingdoms that existed a long time ago and that led up to this fourth kingdom. No, because we're told in verse 12 that those beasts are going to have their lives prolonged even after the Ancient of Days passes judgment and kills the little horn and deals with his terrible kingdom. So there's no getting around it. All of this is happening at the end of the age. And the fact is, the animals are all in the same sea at the time that the sea is roaring. Everything is in an upheaval. They are all there present simultaneously. So the bear in this vision has to be Russia. And what are the three ribs? Let's go back to that. The three ribs are in its mouth between its teeth. In other words, it has taken a bite and ripped these ribs off of something. The fact that it's between its teeth tells us, this is something that happened all at once, right? It didn't take something, eat on it for a while, leave it, go take another bite of something. No, all at once, it chomped into something and removed three ribs from ostensibly another beast. Now, I don't know if these are countries, entire nations, or regions of nations. It could be that the three ribs are part of Ukraine, that it's three regions within Ukraine. But I don't think so. I think these are probably three entire nations that are part of Eastern Europe. Now, Ukraine is not part of the EU or NATO currently, but it is part of an agreement called the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Area, DCFTA, with the European Union. But my guess is that the three ribs does not include Ukraine, because I think the three ribs have to be out of one beast, and it has to be all at once. And so I think that Russia taking Ukraine is actually just setting the stage for a later attack on the EU. And I think that three of the most eastern nations of the European Union are going to get taken out. They're going to be ripped off of the European Union by Russia. I don't think Ukraine is one of those ribs. I think it's a stepping stone. The next part of verse 5 is really something I'll go into in this next video, but just to repeat it, it says that the voice said to the bear, "Arise, devour much flesh." So after those three ribs have been taken, and we don't know how long after, it could be immediately, it could be some time after, but at some point, Russia is going to be told, get up and go destroy a lot of people. And of course they can, because they have an incredible stockpile of nuclear weapons and other types of weapons that we don't even necessarily know about, like javelins launched from space platforms. Yes, that is a thing. Potentially that is a next generation weapon that a superpower could use, where it's essentially just the absolute speed of the projectile coming down from orbit that can cause such kinetic damage that it will wipe out most of a city all at once. So And there's directed energy weapons and other things that that people have talked about quite a bit recently. One way or the other, they have the capability of destroying a lot of cities and a lot of military bases and points of interest. Having said that, we don't know how long it's going to take to get to this point. And that's what I want to leave you with here today, is that, yeah, this is Bible prophecy. It's immutable. You can't get around it. It's going to happen at some point. Don't let your heart be troubled. The King of Kings is going to come and take his rightful place at the right time. And all of the saints will be vindicated. And everything that went wrong is going to be turned on its head. And it's all going to go well for us from that point on. We're going to be in a paradise. We're going to be restored by the grace and the goodness of God. We just have to go through a dark time to get there. But it's not something impossible. We can do it. All things are possible through Messiah who gives us strength. So prepare yourself, brace for this, and prepare in whatever ways you can, physical and spiritual. But don't go around anxious. Don't go around wringing your hands. You're here for a reason, at this time in history for a reason. God didn't put you here just randomly, okay? He knows that there's something about this time that needs you in it. So lean into that. Talk to God about his plans for you. What does he want you doing in these last days? He's going to have some things for you, I promise. So that's it, guys. That's what's happening. You can no longer say that you don't see the modern superpowers in Bible prophecy, because there they are. It's good to know these things. It's also difficult to know these things. But remember, Yeshua said, "Take heart, I've overcome the world."